1,000,000 to 1 standoff. Prologue. Early in July 1998, John Vukovic decided to make an active submission to the West Australian Forest Regional Agreement before the closing date on the 31st. He informed Peter Murphy that he intended to lock on to a woodchip train at the Wesfarmers Bunnings Woodchip Rail Terminal in Bunbury. Pete offered to assist. Early one morning they went down to wait for a train. They waited and waited, but no train came. It had been a pleasant sunny winter day, but they were dissatisfied. Pete made some inquiries and learnt that the woodchip terminal was chock-a-block full of old-growth forest chips, and no more trains were coming until a ship came to load from the stockpile. John learnt that a ship was due at 9 p.m. on the 26th. He decided to try to prevent the ship from docking. He got hold of a plywood dinghy and, with Pete, took it down to Bunbury Inner Harbour to check out the woodchip wharf. While rowing out, it was noticed that regular bailing was required to keep afloat, but they thought that they arrived at the wharf unnoticed. They agreed that if one was chained to number 3 buffer while sitting in the dinghy, the ship might be prevented from docking. The dinghy weighed 40 kilograms, and the ship was registered at 40,000 tonnes, so there was an auspicious ratio of 1,000,000 to 1. While rowing back, with the leaks getting ahead of the bailing, Pete suggested that if the leaks were patched, the operation would be enhanced. John agreed and volunteered to get some sealant and some high tensile chain and a padlock. Some hurricane lamps were also acquired, but thankfully became superfluous when the ship's arrival time was altered to 3 p.m. By the day of the ship's arrival, John had smeared sealant over the more obvious leaks in the dinghy, and Pete had rounded up a couple of canoes and a crew of forest activists. Fierce storms on the 24th and 25th had cleared to occasional showers on the big day when the crew met at John's place and piled gear onto a borrowed truck. John promptly used the truck to ram an innocent car parked on the other side of the road, which he hadn't noticed as he backed the truck out of the driveway. After details were exchanged with the surprisingly placid owner of the car, the truck got underway and the whole shebang eventually arrived at the Bunbury power station, which is situated across the harbour from the woodchip terminal. After a while, the gang was surprised to see the pilot boat come over from the outer harbour and nose up to number 3 buffer before going out to meet the woodchip ship as it approached Bunbury. They guessed that the dinghy had been noticed sniffing around the buffer a couple of days before. With the pilot aboard, the ship slid into the outer harbour and was met by 2 tugboats, which chuffed it into the inner harbour. The dinghy was launched and John took to the oars while Pete directed from the stern. After a couple of strokes, a rollock broke away from the boat, so they had to take an oar each and paddle. This was slower than rowing, and there was a worry that they wouldn't be fast enough to cross the ship's bow. But they did make it and had an opportunity to marvel at the size of the bow bulb. While the tugs turned the ship around, the dinghy arrived at the wharf, where the diminutive Bearheart was shouting and waving at the ship to make sure that the dinghy had been noticed. From the dinghy, a banner reading "Rigged Forest Agreement" was strung up on the buffer. Bearheart was told that if the banner wasn't noticed, she wouldn't be either, so she went off to avoid being arrested. Pete threaded the end of the chain through the steelwork supporting the buffer, and John wrapped the chain around his waist and snapped on the padlock. They then awaited events. Meanwhile, PK and Luke had lashed 2 canoes together and mounted a borrowed outboard motor between them to form a stable camera platform. Took it on a sea trial where the motor broke down, and paddles had to be used to avoid being blown to India. During these goings-on, Jess and Em had contacted those in authority and the media. One press photographer came down but was denied access to the wharf, so she had to take a long-distance shot, which was published in the Bunbury Herald. TV cameraman came down and he was picked up by the canoes, as well as Sky with her still camera. Showers were imminent, so the dinghy crew donned their waterproofs just as some wag on the wharf turned on the sprinklers used to lubricate the buffer. Pete promptly raised his brolly and started bailing with his free hand. John stood up so that the water running down the train wouldn't go into his nethers. The launch tried to keep the canoes away from the action, but PK deftly avoided it so that the cameraman could interview John. The ship had been turned around and pushed up to the wharf, but the dinghy crew wouldn't budge. With great skill, the ship was positioned so that only its bow half was against the buffers and clear of the dinghy. In that position, the ship could not be tied up, so the tugs had to keep pushing on its side to stop it drifting. Woodships could not be loaded. Pete and John were chilled by the time the police arrived and told John to unchain himself. His hands were cold and stiff from holding the dinghy in position from the bottom of the buffer for over 4 hours. The padlock and chain had slipped down to his groin inside his pants, and he had no intention of putting his freezing hands in the region, so he declined. The cops arranged for a launch to put one of them onto the dinghy to cut the chain with bolt cutters. A brave constable attempted this, nearly capsizing the dinghy in the process, but the high tensile chain was not scratched. Then a welder with a gas-cutting gear was put aboard the dinghy, and he managed to cut the chain without burning John or anything else. By then John was quite willing to follow the cops from the launch, up the ladder and onto the wharf. Meanwhile, Pete quietly paddled away towards the powerhouse, and by the time the cops thought about arresting him, he was too far away. It was insisted that John remove the remaining chain before he was put into the paddy wagon. The policemen and women were too coy to grope for the padlock, so it took some time for John to insert the key and unlock with still cold hands. The following Wednesday in Bunbury Court, John pleaded not guilty and bail was continued until a hearing on 2nd December 1998, when he will defend himself. Sky took some great photos, one of which was published in the Bunbury Mail. The others form this background. A portion of the video taken by the TV cameraman, Graham Bishop, was run on GWN News and a smaller portion on the ABC News. His footage formed...
My name's John Vukovic. I'm just an ex-forestry worker. Used to be in the forest in the old days, and this is my submission to the Regional Forest Agreement. It's stopping a wood chip ship coming to load wood chips is the idea.
Is this justifiable, the RFA statement, do you think? Is it responsible?
Well, I wouldn't do it if I thought it was irresponsible. I'm a responsible sort of fella, you know.
Shit.
Goddess is with you.
Well, there's been a lot of community and a lot of groups have put in submissions, but still the bureaucrats are ignoring them and publicly going on with the same rubbish that's been going on all the time, and they're not represented anyway, so have to sort of get a bit of a message somewhere, I hope.
What do you expect to come of it? I mean,
Oh, I don't know, we might get squashed against this buffer, or I might go to jail, or who knows.
Can you get that water turned off? It's not really necessary.
What?
That water that's spurting out there, can you get it turned off?
What are they doing?
Well, they're doing a legitimate form of protest.
You're going to start green there and this bloke comes in, they're going to get crushed.
Well, that's the
Now
problem,
we've
isn't
got
it?
50,000 ton of ship there, held by 2 tugs. Now if the wind gust gets up any higher than another 3 or 4 degrees knots, that ship will just come in.
Okay,
and
well,
you've got
I'm
no control over it, and the responsibility is yours.
Can I just ask you something? Is it not possible for the tugboats to pull the ship away
We
from
can't.
these
If that
piles?
ship gets away, it could do thousands of dollars of damage to either the current berth or our berth.
Oh, really?
So, you know, and
So
you've
it's
got
not
young people's lives at risk. Our lives
I'm
are
just trying to find something that we
so
can...
they either move or they suffer the consequences. I can't do it.
Okay, I just need to ask you something, mate. Can we try and get some conversation happening?
To the other one, set of systems.
You want us to go offshore and look at the community hall, or did you get in touch with the ranger, or do you want us to go to the walk?
Submission's closed in a couple of days' time, so this is my submission.
This is the water level. Thanks, Mary.
This is the projected water level, one that allows for glacial melt in the area. So what we're doing is trying to bring people's attention to the fact that the middle of Bunbury may well be in a situation of underwater in large areas with relatively small melt effects.
Tell me what you're doing. What are you doing?
I am coming here because my mum's coming here and I don't want to see in my bedroom.
I would just like to say I'm very concerned about global warming, and if this is any indication of what's going to happen, I think we should all be doing more than just being aware. We need to be taking action. Thank you.
I'm here.
Why have you got a life jacket on, Kath?
Well, I'm here today, John, to bring people's attention to the big problem we have of global warming. And my particular interest in this subject is to do with animals and the effect that the farming of animals for meat has on the environment in many, many ways. One of the ways is with the huge clearing of land. So there's no trees on the land because the animals, we're using the land for animal farming, and methane emissions from the farting from the mainly the cows, but all of the animals. The amount of water that's used for the production of meat, and how you can produce grain to feed the whole of the world on what just Australia uses for our meat production. So that's my main interest, is I want everyone to stop eating meat. Thank you.
I've come to support the people here who are demonstrating what the level might be, and possibly will be, up that black line with the global warming, if the ice caps melt and the glaciers melt, and they are melting. We're just kidding around doing token gestures, but we have to really get serious. And first thing might be a good idea is to stop eating meat, and second thing is to shut down all the coal-fired power stations and get onto alternative energy and renewable energy seriously.
Look, I'm just someone passing by. I've been over doing business over the road, and I saw these people here making a comment with respect to what's happening with climate change, and we just, as a whole society, whole world, have to take it extremely seriously. These people tell me that the water level, if climate change occurs, which will occur, is going to basically be up to my neck here. Now, there's no way possible that we can survive without very radical changes to the lifestyle, industrial organisation and business work which is going on in our society. So we've just got to stop mucking around and just take this very seriously, and everyone, our entire community, from the little person right up to big business and the government and international organisations and governments, must do something immediately and very seriously about this major problem facing the world.
So what's happening there, Sherry?
I think that the cost to council of perhaps $8 or $9 million over a very few years is an irrelevant amount of money in what could be retained for the future permanent conservation for future generations. I think it's a really sad loss that we're considering for short-term gain, the loss of something so important.
So do you think they're going to sell it?
You mean divide up the blocks land, and sell them?
Develop it?
I think that it will be very difficult at this point to change their minds.
Right, thanks, Sherry. How do you think of winning there, Peter?
I guess probably frustration. It was interesting that the Chamber of Commerce proceeded to actually put a monetary cost on the actual sort of forest and bushland, whereas the fact is that the council hasn't considered the other costs in relationship to the biodiversity values, the recreation values, the tourism values, the spiritual values, the aesthetic values, carbon credits, a whole suite of things. How can you put a cost on those when...
So it's all for $1, is it?
So it's all for $1, and according to the Lord Mayor, $9 million was an estimation. Well, basically $9 million wouldn't buy you very much these days, but all the things I mentioned before are worth far more than $9 million.
Right, thanks, Peter.
No worries.
College Grove is a suburb on the south side of Bunbury, Western Australia. This suburb is planned to be expanded in 3 stages. At the cost of a rare and priceless transition zone, Tuart Forest, between the Indian Ocean and the Preston River. This forest is the habitat of many rare and endangered species, including the ringtail possum and Carnaby's cockatoo. On the 16th of February 2008, a platform was erected in the branches of a tuart tree in the forest area planned for clearing for housing by the government agency Land Corps. For the next 69 days and nights, the platform was occupied, in turn, by several local residents who had never before climbed a rope.
2 sets of 2 white-tailed black cockatoos come through and perch themselves over on that dead tree over there for a couple of minutes.
Why am I going so slowly?
That's alright.
Upside down.
That's alright.
How to look competent going down a road. Ah, I've lost the rope. Can't reach it. Can't reach the rope.
All right, you.
Pull?
Hey?
I can't reach the rope.
Yep. Well, that other plastic you got round the back of your harness, you have to put that on the rope and stand on it. The back of your harness. You just slide it round to the front. Onto the big rope, yeah. And you have to stand in it.
Wild weather and uninvited guests sometimes visited the platform. And then invasion. Police arrived to eject the protesters and the tree sitter, because regulations prevent tree clearing if people are in the area. Protesters resisted by charging the machine and locking onto it.
They're talking about an internationally recognised threat to species.
7 endangered. Save the animals. Endangered animals. You're killing endangered
Watching every move you
We want us all to be happy. We want us to all be healthy.
Not by undue force using your bloody elbow like you were before, mate.
I hope you trim your fingernails too, guys.
Come on, stop using pressure points, you guys.
Come on, have a bit of fairness.
Hey,
Endangered possum! Not much. Endangered cockatoos! Save the animals! We're not moving.
Come on.
We're not moving.
This is a member of the community.
Animals need homes too.
Shoulder, Jesus. He's hurt his shoulder. You've injured him.
Stand up then. Oh, shit. Just walk on your own. What we do to this bush and what we do to these animals, we do to ourselves.
Stalemate ensued while police waited for reinforcements to remove the protesters so that the cherry pickers
Should have realised this when you
in.
took on the job, pal.
Unfortunately, I won this job about 7 months ago, and these sort of things go. And I'm in here contractually.
Refused to do it.
And I've got.
93 acres to go anyway.
Have a conscience.
Trust me,
Think
I
about
won't be
what's going
fucking here
on.
now, but you can't stand behind the camera.
No, we're not. We're not.
Waiting on the world to change. Yeah, we're waiting on the world to change. Yeah.
And to remove the tree sitter.
Good on you, mate.
Eventually the cherry picker arrived. And the platform was demolished. Before, after, and lately. Another camp was set up for the next target area, and the battle continued.
Hey, what are you doing here?
We've just come down to defend the bushland. There's the old white ringtails that have been endangered for quite some time now, all around the south coast.
Was there an MPI? Not once in 8 years was there a major debate brought on by the Labor Party.
Member for Armagh.
Not one.
Member for Mandurah, you might like to look around this place occasionally. I'll formally call you for the second time. And to everybody, to my left and to my right.
ice in your hair, eh?
How about the Indigenous people? Where are their representation?
What's the campaign for now?
What about Samoa? What about climate change?
The taxpayers footing the bill for destroying our natural heritage, our native forests, under Dr. Big's command of the Forest Products Commission. We believe rather than sacking nearly 20% of his staff, Dr. Biggs should fall on his sword himself and resign. He should be accepting responsibility for this dismal performance by his department. The Green Movement has been trying to highlight for years the fact that under Dr. Big's stewardship, the Forest Products Commission has been logging many different logging coops at a loss.